Hello and welcome to Queerly Beloved, the podcast where we talk about everything LGBT. On today's show, we will be discussing coming out experiences, from what it was like to come out to friends and family, how they feel about it now, and advice they'd give to people going through something similar. To do this, I have two guests. Freddie is a transgender man and identifies as bisexual. He has his own experiences from coming out as bisexual to then coming out as transgender, where he has faced difficulties along the way, such as people not accepting him for who he is and being estranged from his family. Lorna is a bisexual/pansexual woman who feels she fits different labels. Lorna's experience of coming out has been different to that of Freddie's, having had acceptance from her family and most of her friends. And I'm Siobhan, your host for today. I will also be discussing my own coming out experiences, such as why I haven't yet come out to my family, but feel comfortable to do so with my friends, and how platforms such as social media have helped me in my own process. I wanted to start with talking about the age when you first realised, because this is something that's different for everyone as well. For me, it was when I was in high school, I was in year 8, and somehow I just knew. What about you guys?
In my case, I sort of came to the realisation over about 4 years from the age of 10. When I was 14, I definitely knew that I wasn't straight and wasn't gay. I was somewhere in between. I don't know, I guess I realised properly about 12, so about the same age.
So you said you were pansexual?
Yeah.
Was it hard to come into that realisation because it's not something it's not sexual that's spoke about a lot?
To an extent, yeah. I think because I have an older sister who identifies as bisexual, she sort of helped me come to the realisation quite easily, because we came out about the same time to each other. I took a couple of years to come out to, like, my parents after that. But I think I discussed it with her and said, you know, it's not just men and women. Is there a name for something other than that? And she said, well, yeah, do some research on it, look it up on Wikipedia. You'll probably find more labels that fit, but you also don't have to find a label necessarily, which is why I am comfortable being referred to as bisexual, pansexual or queer.
I suppose it makes it easier having family that you can talk to, because that's something I've not had. I don't have any sisters or brothers, and I don't know about Freddie, but it's not something that I've been able to talk about to people.
There's a stereotype of, like, the gay cousin or whatever. Like, I'm an only child as well. No one in my family is queer in any way, shape or form. My coming out story was messy, and, like, I'm estranged from my family now because of it. But in terms of, like, having someone to talk to, that is really important.
When did you first realise, Freddie?
Looking with hindsight, that's a very interesting one, because, like, I didn't realise that you could be bisexual. I thought you could only be gay or straight. So I fluctuated for a while, because this was before I realised that I was trans as well. So I identified as lesbian for a long time, and then realised that I also liked men as well, which was an interesting one, because most people have, like, the gay realisation as opposed to, like, the straight one, as it were.
When you both made this realisation, how did that realisation make you feel? Were you scared? Were you not bothered at all?
I feel like I was a lot more scared than I needed to be, given that I knew my family would be accepting. I didn't know at the time that I had a transgender relative, and that my mum had really helped her through transitioning and everything. But once I heard that my sister was also queer, I was like, oh, okay, it's not going to be a big deal. But I was also still scared. I was also religious at the time, and knew that I would face backlash if I came out to people at my church. So I still haven't.
I think religion's a big thing, and I'll come on to that later.
You also get, like, backlash at school that you don't expect. Like, when you come out to your friends, they'll avoid you in the changing rooms, thinking that you're looking at them. Like, honey, the biggest thing about coming out that young is an absolutely overwhelming fear of making women uncomfortable in any way, shape or form.
Yeah, because that's what you're taught, isn't it? The girls in the changing rooms, you assume that they are very straight. They think that girls that are gay fancy them, and it is just not the case, and it is a very uncomfortable environment. I did actually want to come on to school next, because I think school does make it harder. I also went to a Catholic school, and it's something that my friends joke about now. Oh, you went to a Catholic school and you're a lesbian. That's funny. And I can joke about it now. But at school, I really didn't come out to anyone. Catholic school, religion, and there's the idea that people of a certain religion don't agree with homosexuality in any way. So I didn't really come out to anyone, not even my friends, up until year 11. There was one of them, and I thought, oh, I'll just mention something that I don't like. I'm not interested in boys. And she took it the wrong way. Coming back to the PE conversation, she took it the wrong way like that. Oh, they didn't want to get undressed now, a lesbian, because they think that I might like them, which wasn't the case, but it was very uncomfortable. And then after that, I just left it. I didn't tell anyone from school or anything. No teachers knew, nothing. Did you come out at school, Lorna, or was it something that you kept to yourself?
No, I feel like there's a certain sort of, not really narrative, but there is a certain sort of structure that most queer people go through. Of like, as soon as they come out, it's everything they think about. And that sort of tails off eventually. I don't really think about my sexuality that much anymore, but at the point, yeah, I came out to all of my friends pretty much immediately. I knew that they were all going to be really accepting. I had one of them take it a bit the wrong way, but they were at a different school. We just lost touch after an enormous fight in Primark when I let it slip. I feel like I had quite a good experience coming out in school in that, like, just about everyone I told was fully accepting of it. My best friend, I went like, I think I might have a crush on a girl, and she went, well, yeah, you're officially lost to know. And I feel like that sums me up pretty well, to be fair.
There wasn't very many people who identified as LGBT at my school, and this might be the same for you, Freddie, being at a Catholic school.
I guess it's a bit different for me because, like, public school wasn't Catholic or anything. It didn't push religion. So I knew quite a few people who were openly out, and people didn't really try to hide it necessarily. So it was quite nice that by the end of high school, most of my friends had come out.
I saw my friendship group come out slowly, but then I got torn away from that friendship group and I've not really spoken to them since. I did get put in a Catholic school when I was 14. Coming to terms with being bi in a Catholic school and then coming to terms with being trans on top of that was a lot. It was really difficult to make friends. So a lot of the time I just spent time by myself. There was a group of people who were in the year below me that got the same school bus as me. I got to know them and I came out to them. They thought they were queer as well. They were the most welcoming people that I knew at the school in terms of like how they presented themselves, how they like were open about a lot of things. But of course, because they're in the year below, it meant that I very much felt isolated from my own year group. The backlash mostly, funnily enough, like from teachers more than anything else, because you could tell what their beliefs were, but they had to be accepting because they were part of a school in a way that like they very much had comments, but they had to reserve it for themselves, but they didn't do a good job of it. They were offhand comments. So when I came out as trans, they immediately said to me that you can't do PE anymore, you can't do this, that and the other, and like if you want to use the toilets you've got to use the disabled ones, and it's very much we'll shove you into the corner and hope that you won't complain about it kind of thing.
So I'm guessing school for you was a very uncomfortable environment to be in.
It was just a jarring one, I think, as well, because it was gendered uniform and the school was very big on tradition and they were very big on girls wear skirts, boys wear trousers. As a trans person, that's a nightmare essentially.
There was a point in high school just before coming out where I was quite tomboyish and people did start questioning a little bit about my gender.
Yeah.
To an extent. Even though I still had long hair and acted quite feminine, and it was clearly an attempt to look a bit more masculine rather than actually transitioning.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder if people have always known, especially in my family, have they always known? I've never come out to them, but have they always known that I am not straight?
Yeah, I've wondered that about myself because I was quite tomboyish. I wasn't really into like looking sporty, but I liked playing sports. I was good at that, and being quite tomboyish. Most of my friends were guys growing up, but at the same time my sister was the complete opposite. And my parents knew about both of us at about the same time. So I don't think it's necessarily about that. I think it's subtler vibes that you pick up on, but also if you make a conscious effort, they might pick up on them more quickly.
Moving on to talk about family, I'll be honest and say that I am not out to my family. And they are very Catholic, so it's the fear of rejection, the fear of having religion thrown in my face. I don't want that. So at this point, I'd rather not tell them. And it's just easy for me like that. So what are your experiences like with family? Is there anything that stopped you or made you want to come out to them?
As I say, for the most part, my coming out experience to my family was really, really positive. There was just one little thing with my mum. She is Christian. I think her issue with it was that I wouldn't want kids genetically if I was with a woman. You know, I'd have to, quote unquote, have to adopt children if I wanted them. But then I sort of, I guess, came out in a way again when I was 18 and said, because my body has so many weird things about it, I don't want kids of my own anyway. I'm going to adopt whether I'm with a woman or a man if I want to be a mother. And I think that's the point when she started being just 100% accepting of it, realising that it really wouldn't make any difference. The only difference to her it would make is the pronouns when referring to my partner. It's not a boyfriend, it's Lorna's girlfriend.
We both know that you've had girlfriends and boyfriends. Do your parents act differently when you bring a girl home to when you bring a boy home?
I think when I told my mum, there was a slightly different reaction. Usually when I say, oh mum, I have a boyfriend, it's immediately, where did you meet him? Can we meet him? What's he into? What does he look like? What does he do? What are his future plans? Do you want a wedding in spring or summer? You know, that sort of stuff. And when I told my mum, oh mum, I have a girlfriend, she just went, oh.
She didn't have much to say.
She gave it a minute and then started with the questions. I think it just takes a little bit longer to realise, like, oh, this is how it works in practice, not just in theory. Okay.
What about you, Freddie? How was your experience?
So the weird thing for me in terms of like coming out to my family, coming out as trans, that was a whole other thing entirely. I felt that was more reserved for like a different story, I guess. But coming out as bisexual, I was very flippant about it because I felt it shouldn't be drawn that much attention to, because it wasn't affecting me as adversely as it could have done, in that the sense that I ended up coming out through a job application form for Greg's when my dad said, can I proofread it? And I went, yeah, sure, and then forgot that I'd clicked the like bisexual option, and he just kind of was like, okay. He did originally think that I was dating my best friend, and that was a whole interesting conversation to have, because he was like, oh, where's Sky today? And I'd be like, oh, she's with her girlfriend. But, you know, that was the closest I think I got to having queer partner talk with family members, I guess.
What about when it came to coming out as transgender?
I'm estranged from my family now because of complications with being trans. I very much did like something you'd see out of like a YA fiction novel. I wrote a letter to my dad and I like gave it to him in the morning before I got the school bus. He read that. He came to pick me up from school the same day instead of me getting the bus, which was terrifying. And he was talking about the letter, and he was talking about how he understood it, and he was like, oh, you need to be patient with me. And he was very understanding at the time, but as time progressed, it got worse in the sense that the way that he saw me wasn't as masculine or male or anything. He wouldn't use my preferred name, and he wouldn't use my pronouns or anything like that, despite the fact that I'd asked him to several occasions. And he'd get very aggressive about it to the point where I felt that I couldn't live in that environment anymore, and I had to leave, and I eventually did in my second year of college.
If you are transgender, then I understand how it must be difficult. Then coming out as maybe gay or bisexual, it's a totally different aspect, isn't it? You're going through something completely different in a way.
I was in a space where I had to, for my own mental well-being, because being referred to as my older name and my older pronouns was a detriment to my mental health. Yeah. And it did make me feel bad about myself, and for that reason, that's why I did come out when I did. Whereas I feel like coming out as queer, like I said to you, I was very flippant about it, because to me, I felt, well, this is something that I can work with, and it's something that I can approach at my own steady pace. Whereas being trans, I felt if this doesn't change action soon, I'm going to have to take matters into my own hands, and that's what I ended up doing anyway.
Coming out as gay or bisexual, you can do it at your own pace, but when it affects your gender, then why should you wait?
Especially with NHS services as well, like at the moment with gender clinics, the sooner you come out the better, because you'll be on a waiting list ready for hormone treatment.
What about when it came to coming out to friends?
Well, my best friend, I told her that I was trans, but she was very much like, yeah, that's fair, what name do you want? Told her, and then like 2 minutes later we were back to ordering Chinese takeaway. Very casual on that front. And then in terms of like coming out as bi to her, that was very much the same as well. Like I say, the friendship group I had, they kind of knew when I came back to school wearing trousers instead of a skirt, and I explained it to them, because teachers just went from using my old name to the new name that I wanted, and it just kind of changed overnight.
I feel like we've touched on it already with you, Lorna, but was it any difference coming out to family?
A little bit, I guess, in that when you live at home and you're going to school, you can cut friends out of your life, but you can't cut family out of your life. So there's a bit less pressure without having to worry about like where you're going to live and that sort of thing. So I guess I was in a place of a lot of privilege in that I knew that all of my family and most of my friends, at the very least, would be completely accepting. But that was like when I was 14. You're probably going to end up coming out a lot during your life. There isn't just one time that you come out and that is coming out. I don't really think that I came out at 14 and left it there. Whenever I have a new partner, I have to tell them about it.
For me, with friends, I went to college in Leeds and I met people who actually didn't care. They're like, oh, that's cool, we accept you, fine. Coming to university is a totally different environment as well, because people don't care again. Outside of college and university, I am on Twitter. That is where most of my friends come from, and they are all gay, so they don't care. And sometimes having gay friends does help as well, because then you know that you're not alone, you've got somewhere to go. Sometimes with family you don't want to come out because of whatever you've heard them say or whatever you think they might think, or because of religion or whatever other reason. So I think coming out to friends is a lot easier. What about you, Freddie?
Well, so college, because like I came out as trans in year 10, 11 time. I didn't really have any other way to come out. I just had to be overt with it because everyone already knew who I was. When it came to college, I decided to try and be stealth, so I didn't tell anyone that I was trans. I just presented as male and with my name and pronouns and everything, and I went about that way for about 2 years. Then I came out like towards the end of college, mostly out of spite because my teacher was being transphobic. She was basically saying that boys are raised is very particular and the way that like girls are raised are very particular, and it leads to like the nature versus nurture argument, but in a way that was very problematic in its ways, and saying that if you raise boys feminine they're going to be gay, they're going to, you know, this, that and the other. And I was like, well, how was I raised then? Because I was raised a girl in front of the entire year group, and none of them had known I was trans, and that was a interesting moment for everyone. But then I was like, do I want to be stealth at university? But because of the experiences that I had with my family, I very much felt that because I had to be so closeted around them, that I wanted to be open in university. So for my first year I was trans representative for the Students' Union.
I guess people here don't care then, they just accept it.
I mean, even if they don't care, if they don't accept it, then I don't want them in my life, and that's as simple as, really.
If you would like to get involved in the conversation today, drop us a message at queerlybeloved.pod on Instagram or queerly-beloved on Twitter. Some people have written into the show about their own experiences. One of them is from Amy. She put, I'm 21 and bisexual. I joined a fandom on Twitter and it changed my life. Before Twitter, I didn't know anyone in my life who identified as LGBT. My sexuality was something I hid, but with my friends online, it felt easy to be truthful about my feelings and they never once judged me for it. My family don't know about my sexuality and I'm not sure how they would react if I told them. For now, I'm comfortable with the fact they don't know because I have many friends who accept me for who I am. I can relate to that. I think social media does have a big part to play in some people's coming out process. Did social media help either of you?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how that one's relating specifically to fandoms in social media.
Yeah.
Because there are certain fandoms where you'll find a disproportionately high number of queer people.
When I ran away from home, I sofa surfed for a bit, and the people that I stayed with, I met on a Discord server. So once again, like the online friend motif carries on, I suppose. I met them through the YouTuber Luke Cutforth, and he had a Discord server, and we all met on there. But I stayed on their sofa for a bit, and like, you know, I came out to them as trans, I came out to them as bi, like the minute I met them, because they were online, and I was like, well, if they don't like it, then I can find someone else, it's fine. They're the closest friends I've ever had.
I've been in fandoms for a few years. When I was in that fandom, most of the people that I knew or talked to were gay or part of the community, and I get on with them really well. We meet up in person all the time. When I'm with them, I can be actually myself. When at home, it's more of a pretense.
Jeanette Winterson, a lesbian author, was saying that there's different versions of you for different places, and like there's a version of you that you left behind when you go places. In your case, going home, you're going to that version of yourself. People see you as different versions of yourself. I don't want to say it's a performance because that seems very jarring, but it very much feels like you're showing them what they want to see a lot of the time as well.
Sometimes as well, media can help people to come out, TV especially. I mean, sometimes it can also not be very good representation.
I guess it's a bit polarising for bi-pan queer people.
Yeah, because there's not that much representation for them.
Well, there kind of is to an extent. I mean, there was even an episode on Sex and the City about bisexuality. Oh. The problem is that it was completely toxic. Biphobic. They always just sum up to be, you know, if you're bi, you're going to cheat, you're going to want an open dynamic, whereas in reality, literally the only difference between me and a straight person is that I might also be attracted to women.
Yeah, I remember growing up watching Torchwood was one of the like defining moments for me. Watching Captain Jack be like as pansexual as he is just on screen was very like, I don't want to say liberating, but very exciting to just see that be as casual as it was, because why should it be a big deal?
Media representation is really important because it's not just whether you feel comfortable with it and whether people around you say it's okay to be the way you are. Seeing it on television and it just being something that's there because it's not a narrative and a plot, unlike the queer experience, the queer narrative, which is the internal struggle and then a resolution, or fighting with a family member about being queer and then a resolution. Instead of it being made into a narrative, if it's just there and just exists, like Captain Jack in Doctor Who, it makes it so much easier to accept. Because you think, oh, it doesn't have to be my life. It's okay to be that way. There are more important things about me, like that I am a nice person. Okay, maybe I can deal with that.
Yeah, like a lot of the time I feel like, I don't want to say to make it digestible for people, but a lot of the time like media tells a story that in order for it to be seen as acceptable there has to be a sob story to it, or a narrative that portrays it in negative light that then gets changed to show how people change their mindsets, when reality is a lot of the time people are just queer, and like you say, it's only a small part of who they are. Like, you know, like in your case, Lorna, you're queer and you're a Morris dancer and you like folk music.
We spoke about coming out and how that's happened for us, but how do you feel about it now? Are you comfortable with who you are?
To an extent, yeah. I'm happy that I came out when I did, and that I've been able to grow up throughout high school being out and knowing who's comfortable with it. I think one of the best parts of coming out that young is watching people growing accepting of it and realising that it really isn't that different, and sort of realising that they made a mistake when they were really disgusting towards it to begin with. But I feel like much more than people expect, it's really internalised. There are days when I'm like, I'm not actually queer though, am I? Am I really though? Can I actually imagine myself marrying a woman? Why can't I date a woman for a long period of time and just be okay with it? It is quite internalised. You can come out, present as perfectly comfortable and confident with it, but you don't always practice what you preach.
It's a very difficult, like you say, internal struggle, and a lot of it does come from like exterior factors, I think, as well, like the build up. In terms of like myself and comfortability, like it's a difficult one because societal pressure, like I know that sounds stereotypical to say, in terms of transitioning, people hold the opinion that unless you fully medically transition, you are not a valid trans person. And I've yet to even have top surgery. I've only been on hormones about 2 years, and I still don't know how I feel about the idea of having like every surgery. That is an internalised doubt as well, because part of me goes, well, I'm not as trans as XYZ, when it's not a race or a competition, it's just identity, you know.
I'd say that I am comfortable with my sexuality, but I'm not comfortable with it when I'm with certain people. So it's going back to the pretending bit. I often find that I'm not comfortable with it when I'm with people from older generations. You always expect them to be a bit more homophobic about it and not understanding of it, which sometimes isn't the case.
Yeah, I feel like it's less about showing different personalities than more just not telling them or not showing them certain things. It's like the whole debate as to, do you need to come out? Should you have to come out?
No. The answer is no, you shouldn't have to come out.
In which case, you're not hiding anything from your family, Siobhan. You just haven't come out.
Oh, Flan, you've made me feel a lot better. Hopefully we get to a point one day where coming out isn't needed. Do you guys wish things could have been any different for you at all during coming out? I mean, Lon, you sound like you've had a pretty good experience, but Freddy's is a bit different.
To an extent, but also no, not at all. There are bits that you look at and you think, oh, I wish that hadn't happened. But at the same time, if it hadn't happened, you wouldn't realise how lucky you are. Like, I've had it really easy with my family. So, knowing Freddie and knowing, like, what he's had to go through with his family has made me really happy that my family was so accepting. And yeah, I lost one friend along the way, but also, I don't really care. I wouldn't have wanted her in my life. If I had been straight and she'd done that with someone else, I still wouldn't have wanted her in my life. So I think there are bits that you look at and you don't like thinking about, but also I don't regret it. I don't wish it had been different, really.
Like, I hate to say that it's a learning curve, but it can often be that. Yeah. It helps shape you. Like, you know, the way that my family reacted taught me that you don't have to shape yourself around how other people see you. And just because someone doesn't like it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to hate yourself for it. In terms of, like, doing anything differently, I think I was talking to Lorna about this before. Like, I think she asked me, like, would you, if you could choose to be, like, a cis man, would you do that? And to me, I don't know any different from being trans, so to me, I prefer to be trans because that's all I know. And I'm not saying I want to choose to be a minority here, that's definitely not the case, but it's just a case of I am who I am and it's shaped me, and I know my own boundaries better than I ever would if I was cis and heterosexual.
Do I wish things had been different? I don't know. Even though my family don't know, I'm quite happy with the way things are at the moment. Maybe it would have been better if they could be more accepting of the LGBT community, but at the moment, I don't actually mind that they don't know. I'm quiet, comfortable, and I wouldn't change anything at this moment.
I think it's interesting that you said that, Freddie, about, like, would you choose to be quote unquote, the norm. I wouldn't want to be straight.
The thing...
I experience attraction to different genders in different ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's so much more exciting than being straight.
I was thinking the other day, and this might make me into the criteria of being, like, you know, non-binary masculine, but I was thinking that if I was born a man, I wouldn't feel conformity as a man either. I feel like I'd be, like, over feminine, and I'd want to present myself in more effeminate ways. In, like, LGBT spaces, I've been asked, oh, are you detransitioning? Because I wear women's clothes a lot of the time and stuff like that. And it's very jarring to me, because if I was a cis man doing that, that question wouldn't be asked in the slightest. Part of who I am is I feel confident enough to fluctuate between hyper-masculinity and hyper-femininity whenever I want to.
I think the only thing that most of the LGBT community people that, like, I've talked to would want to change about their coming out experience is how nosy other people are.
Yeah.
Like, if you just leave people to their own devices, then generally they'll be a lot happier. For example, my bisexuality, and they're like, does that mean you want a threesome? Does that mean you cheat? Does that mean you want an open dynamic? What does it matter to you? Unless you want to date me, why does it matter to you?
I often get asked about, like, genitals and stuff like that, and it's like, you wouldn't ask a cis person this question.
No.
Why is it any of your business now? It's not relevant here, and it's not relevant at all. But so many times I've been asked, like, what's your old name? You wouldn't ask a cis person who'd changed their name what their old name was. Why do you feel that inclined to do it with a trans person?
I mean, it's different if you want to tell them.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you just wouldn't ask it, I wouldn't anyway.
Yeah. I respect that it's curiosity, but also, if it's getting invasive, it's beyond just curiosity.
Sometimes curiosity needs to be curbed.
Yeah, like, don't ask.
Yeah.
Of course, a trans person is most likely going to have a dead name, but don't ask it. They're probably not going to tell you.
What would your advice be to others that are going through something similar?
Well, I can only really speak for people coming out as bi or pan or queer, but I would advise them to sort of test the waters before coming out to anyone important in your life who can actually cause you damage. So anyone who would tell other people in school if you're going to come out young like I did, or your parents or family, or anyone who takes care of you or responsibility for you in any way, test the waters with them first. So, for example, I would play, like, Dodie and Hayley Kiyoko and things like that quite loudly. An important part of the coming out process is realising that coming out as a sexuality or a gender doesn't define you as that.
Yeah.
You have to pick, like, what parts of that you want to be.
I think testing the waters is a good one, because I feel like most people have done that. Because you don't want to just come out and say it, you just want to have an idea of how they might react to it. But I'd say do that. If you do get to the point of where you want to come out, don't rush into it too much.
I was going to say, don't feel as though you have to either. Like,
Yeah.
of course, like, with trans stuff, like, as we said, it is a bit of a different kettle of fish in terms of, like, coming out because you want to be referred differently and stuff like that. But in terms of sexuality, just because you feel as though you have to doesn't mean you should. You shouldn't have to do it because other people are doing it, or you shouldn't feel the need to do it just because you can then say you've done it. It's a learning curve, like we said, and that's part of it.
Yeah, I feel like this is a bit of a controversial opinion, but you hear from a lot of people, like, just in general society and advice online, a lot of people trying to be really accepting and saying, just live your truth, like, live how you are. Just tell people.
Roll with the punches.
Yeah, just go with it. But no, make sure you're safe first. Make sure it's what you want first. Make sure that you can handle internalized guilt, because you're not just going to deal with your own problems to do with it first.
You have to come out to yourself. Like, that is very important.
You have to make sure that you're okay with it first. That's why I didn't come out as soon as I knew that I was bisexual, because I was dealing with a lot of worries about it and a lot of, well, I know that I am, but I'm not comfortable being bisexual right now. And then waited until I was definitely comfortable with it, and I talked to my sister about it and been like, how do you get comfortable with that before coming out to other people? And that's how I essentially didn't have a meltdown about it.
Do it in your own time. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but if you want to, don't rush into it. And I think that's the best advice that we could offer. Thank you for listening. If you would like to share your own coming out experiences, please follow us at queerbeloved.pod on Instagram and queerly-beloved on Twitter. If you need help or support with anything that's been discussed today, head over to lgbt.foundation, where you can find helpful links and information to help you in your own coming out process.